Hello and welcome to Tournament Poker Project. My name's Jon.
And I'm Tain.
And we are two recreational players. And this is our journey to get good enough at poker to be able to compete at the World Series of Poker, right, Tain?
Yeah, smash it up. Go to Vegas, leave our mark.
Leave our mark. What have you been up to this week?
Been doing some more reading. I've got back into a tiny live game. It's only the one, but I've been avoiding playing live for quite a while because where we've both been reading up on GTO, I felt a bit Dunning-Kruger. I'm down in the depths of, oh God, everything I did know is wrong and everything I do know is unlearnt yet. So I was in a bit of a, I feel I love what I'm learning about GTO, but I'm not in a place where I can get to a table and confidently call a small raise because I'm not sure where I'm at. Which is a good place to be because it's kind of, I feel in the back of my mind that I am tearing it up and starting again rather than trying to cling to some of the old concepts. So I'm.
And that's quite daunting. That is quite daunting to do, and I can well relate. Like it's kind of like you got to let go of some of your beliefs and move past them, and inevitably it's going to mess your game up before it improves it.
Yeah, like a couple of the different concepts that I'm comfortably getting my head around is, the difference between like a static board and a dynamic board are very different to what everyone would describe as a wet board and a dry board. Different things like bet sizing isn't bet big when you're good, bet small when you're not. It's complete opposite. Bet big when you've got big bluffs but big value. Bet small. There's other times to bet small. There's range advantage if you've got the nut advantage and the range advantage. Bet big rather than just because you've actually got a good hand that you want value from. There's lots that it's settling in well, but there are still a few things that I really need to get to the bottom of it. And one of them's coming up in the hand actually, where the big blind defend range is just out of this world compared to what I'd ever consider. I'm probably not playing the button enough, but seeing like 50 to 60 to 70% big blind defending range is baffled. But yeah, where are you at with it?
So I've finished the Andrew Broker's book, the first one, the Play Optimal Poker. I got about 2 chapters in and was just like, this is going to change my world. And I love it when you get those moments. It just feels so good. It's like whatever happens, however frustrated I get because I can't understand something or however much this messes up my existing game, this is like an enlightening moment, an opening of a new door in poker. So yeah, it's always good. But I've read the book now. I need to read it again, in all fairness. There was definitely some aha moments in there, on what game theory really means, about the equilibrium, about what strategies, strategy pairs that work in equilibrium means and why that works. And then starting to see how adjusting one is then exploitable and how you would adjust the opposing strategy to exploit that. But there's some really kind of complex ideas within that I need to go back over. The way he breaks it down is fantastic, like taking it right back to a really basic toy game, as he describes it. Where you've like driving on the left and the right hand side of the road, for instance, and if that was like considered like a game and you could look at the outcomes, each driver's got the choice between either drive on the left, in the center, or on the right. What strategies would be at equilibrium, basically scoring that if you don't crash, you both get a 1. If you do crash, you get a -10. So, and then basically plotting that on a grid to show if this person's got the strategy of driving on the left and this person's driving on the left, also that it's an equilibrium. And then just building out from that and then taking it a bit more complex, starting to look at a basic game of 3 cards, a king, a queen, and an ace, and you just get dealt 1 each. And then you can either put your bet in or not, and then increasing that to, all right, the other one can now raise. and then increasing that to ace to 5 games. So you dealt 1 card, but you can have any card between a 5 up to an ace. And then it kind of, you suddenly find yourself back in the poker world, understanding the game on a completely new level, which is fantastic. But, you know, again, some of the nuances of it and how the slight differences or exploitable kind of deviances from equilibrium, how that then needs minor adjustments or sometimes major adjustments in the opposing strategy. It's almost like I understand the core concept of it, but the nuances of it and the kind of more subtle parts of it, I need to go back over and get my head around the maths again.
Yeah, I mean, it's listening to you talk about the books where people wouldn't be aware, I'm reading the Dara O'Kearney book on game theory, just so we've got two complementary different different ways of understanding game theory, and it is really different. So like the toy games don't really exist in O'Kearney's book. I think he has introduced it for a single concept, but it was very disposable. It was, here's an illustration of it in action, but here's the real nuts and bolts of where we're building our ranges. And O'Kearney does everything in reverse order. So you start with the river and then you work backwards, essentially, where it goes river, flop, turn, and then I'm assuming we're going to finish on 3, but I've not got that far yet. But for the most part, for me, the way that he teaches the style is much more from going through everything kind of methodically, but with a lot more repetition. But it's not where I'm understanding it in a dumb fashion. You know, I'm just repeating. So not going to do that, not going to do this. They're not going to raise with that. They're not going to raise. You've got to have that because it's a blocker. I'm not going to have that because it opens up there, right? It's repeating the same questions almost to yourself, so that every single time you're even looking at your bluff hands and you're thinking, what is that blocking? Is that actually blocking the hands that I want to fold? Is that blocking the hands that my value wants calling? Is it going to draw to a better hand? And you repeats it, so that what I'm finding really useful is when I go to live games like I did the other night, just small segments are useful to my game, even though I know there's a whole load of stuff that I've got to really sit down and say, okay, I don't play game theory optimum ranges even remotely, so I need to work out what they are, work out what my action from there is beyond. I mean, that's the most basic part because you can memorize opening ranges, but I can start implementing small parts of game theory, and it's working. You know, I won a really big pot. It was only a single big pot, but I actively sat there and thought, I've followed the action, I've done my hand reading, I know exactly what your range is, and you've eliminated 90% of your range in this position. So the fact that you're still betting tells me you've got XYZ hands, and here's how I should respond with my entire range at this point.
What did you like? Do you remember what you had? Do you remember? Did you have like top pair or was it middle pair? What was your holding?
I had ace 10, and the flop came out. Was it ace? It was like ace 9-4, I think it was, or ace 9-5. So it was a fairly ace rag. There was a single heart. I had ace 10 suited, and there was a heart there for a backdoor. But the player I was playing against had an extremely narrow range. They were the type of player that rarely raises, but when they do raise, you can guarantee they've got a strong part of the board. But the whole point was that it was a 4-bet pre-flop and he hadn't raised at any point. He'd just called, which eliminated everything from the top of his range. He'd capped his range, completely condensed everything down to what essentially was braggy aces that my ace 10 beat. So I roped him in. Turns out he then hit 2 pair just as I hit my flush. It was like, okay. So I got more chips than I was maybe entitled to because of a bit of good fortune on the end. But the whole point was that I was winning the entire hand, and I made some pretty strong decisions, because for that player to be betting against me 2 months ago, before I started reading about game theory, I would have shit the bed and said there is absolutely no way I'm playing against that player with that range. They only ever raise with the best hands, and there's an ace out there, and my ace 10 ain't good. And that was it. Or I'd maybe do a little re-raise, a little two-bet. If they responded to that in any kind of positive way, that was me done with the hands. Yet this time, sat there, looked at it, sat there, and I proper sat and tanked for a while and just really went through. I just couldn't put him on any cards that were beating me that he hadn't four bet pre-flop. And there we go. Yeah. And I was bang on to do so. Got maximum value.
That must feel pretty good, right?
Yeah, it's awesome. Like proper. I mean, that set me up for the rest of the tournament, to be fair.
I played a live one on Friday. I think I might have mentioned to you already. But it was one I was really proud of. It wasn't GTO as such, but it was more just the hand reading that meant. So there was a king on the flop, and I just had the pair of jacks. There was a jack on the flop. I think it was like king, jack, blank, and I had the jack with an ace. But I can't remember exactly. But the way the betting had gone, I was able to feel not certain that he didn't have the king, but it was very suspicious. It's like, it seems suspicious that you'd have, I think there was a point where he checked, and it's like, I'm not sure you'd be checking there with the king, with the top pair. It might have been on the turn when a second king came. And before, I think I've been more like, oh my God, he's got a really strong hand now. But for a little while now, I obviously realised actually, when there's a second king hits, he's less likely to have one of the, another king. And that's a big part of my decision making as well. And I managed to call off for pretty much all my chips with the jack, with those kings on the board. And it was a correct decision. I called his large bet. We'd put in like 3/4 of our stack by that point. And I turned my hand over and he just mucked. But it was a great feeling that, the hand reading was paying off, and I could sit there in a live game and actually read a hand to a point where, you're never certain that you're ahead, but that you've got a good chance of being good.
Yeah. And that's it. Like, it's responding to plays with your entire range. And the thing that's really enlightening for me is the construction of bluffs, so that they've got actual genuine value, but you can manipulate that value from loads of different places, like double back doors, blockers. But because it makes sense, because they've got a value, they also lose that value if that doesn't realize on the next street, and that kind of frees you. It's completely frees me away from that stupidity of just bet 3 streets of bluff with absolute ridiculous hands, because I figured that that's what 3 streets of bluffing were. Not, I've got a good hand that can get better, so even if you call me and even if you call me and I need runner, well, I've got a combo of runners that I can hit, plus I've got the jack, meaning that you're unlikely to be calling with ace jack. Just silly things like that. There's more rhyme and reason to it that I can really construct a proper response in my mind. And
well, it sounds like we're really learning how to play poker here. I've got to say, it's going well. I mean, it's been up and down, hasn't it? And I mean, we don't even mention our bankrolls at the start of the pod. Make of that what you will, listeners.
Not just yet.
But it's definitely going the right way, and I don't feel deluded in that. I know there's still a long way to go, but just the hand reading alone, and how I feel like I'm doing that at spots during live play now, it's it's definitely helping. It's definitely helping. And thank you to Andrew Brocus for his book. That's been a real eye opener, as I said, and I feel like that's going to be a really big part of my learning curve as well.
Yeah, same for Dara O'Kearney. It's amazing. Like, I can't put it into words like how amazing it's been.
Big up to those two. Yeah, wicked.
Yeah.
All right then, Tain. So should we dive into a hand?
We can, and I love that it's a big blind defense hand, because this is quite literally, I think just before you even showed me this, I was saying one of the things that I really want to get my head around is big blind defense. I'm terrible. I shit you not. About 6 months ago, I was defending from the big blind about 5 to 10% at best.
Yeah, I mean but it depends what you're defending against, what position you're defending against. Like obviously a button defend, like if you're defending against a button open, it's going to be massive. But then if you're defending against an under the gun open, it will be a much smaller defense, maybe not as low as 10%, but that does massively impact it as well. So we are on the big blind. We have 7 people at our table, so us and 6 others. We are in the final 2 tables of a multi-table tournament, several hundred entrants. So down to the final 2, I think there's about 15 people left or so. We're in the big blind, and the action folds around to the cut-off position, who has pretty big stack. He's biggest at this table. The blinds are 700 small blind, 1400 big blind, and there's an ante as well. So the before anyone's put any money in, the pot size is just about 3,300, or 3,325 is the exact amount. So we've got an M of roughly, what's that, 8 or so. And the guy that opens here in the cutoff, he has a much bigger M of well over 20, about 25 or something like that. So the guy in the cutoff opens as a min raise. Now my read on this guy was that I don't think we'd seen much shown down, if anything, so I could never confirm it, but his betting frequency seemed to be really quite high throughout, pre-flop and throughout the rest of the streets. So I kind of started to feel like, when your global frequency is that high in general, you've got quite a lot of bluffs, or you're doing something. You're either bluffing too much or you're value betting way too wide in comparison to GTO. But then at this stage, with these stack depths, I think people were probably being a bit tight, so maybe he was just adjusting to the table. But either way, he had quite high frequency. So he opens, we get 2 folds, and then the action is on us in the big blind, and we have the 8 of spades, 5 of spades. So what are your first thoughts here, Tain? Is this a defend? Is this a raise?
Yeah, it's definitely a defense. I would say this is a call most of the time. This is the part I'm trying to get my head around a little bit, whereby it's slightly connected to your hand, it's suited, and it kind of fits with the kind of hands that the big blind would be calling with rather than re-raising. This certainly isn't in your free bet range, I wouldn't say. I don't think it's strong enough. 8-7, I think definitely would be, but then your stack isn't strong enough to support that. So maybe this is the point where you're tightening that a little bit. You kind of have got, you're getting closer to the shove sizing. If you call this, you're gonna have a SPR of just 3. It's exactly that. Yeah. You're kind of calling this on the brink of having to go all in. So a fold here isn't the worst thing. Did you say is this the final table?
It's final 2 tables. So I think there's about 15 players left or so.
But already in the money?
We were just in the money, but it was all quite low. This was a $3.30 or $3.30 multi-table tournament. I think there was a rebuy on it as well. So it's quite low stakes. So I think at this point you're in the money, but you're kind of disappointed if you've played 6 hours and are destined to win about $8. So it was still kind of desperate to get to that final table, as once the pay starts jumping up a fair bit.
Yeah, final table bubble. I would be interested to see the payouts structure. And if we assume that you had to get all your chips in at this point, the SPR meant that you're kind of betrothed to the pot, what the jump to the next level would be in terms of ICM. So are you gaining enough on the payout ladder in your equity, you know, are your chips suddenly worth more, that it's worth doing that with 8-5? Because you need to pick a spot, and this maybe isn't the worst time to pick that spot, especially if a shove also gets folds.
Yeah, with this guy's frequency, we could pick up another 6,000 chips here. We're sitting on 26,000 chips, by the way. So yeah, big blind is 1,400. We're on 26,000 chips. M's about 8. And like I say, the opener's on 86,000, so he's got us all really covered. Yeah, I don't hate that. You know, with his constant aggressive play, doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be calling anything, especially not 26,000 more chips. He's he's raising really wide. He's probably folding to a jam a lot of the time. And then we've just made a little 6,000 chips. You know, we've just added on, what's that? Another 25% of our pot on top, of our chip stack on top.
Just looking at the fact that they've only min raised, and the people behind them, I mean, they're buttons most of their stacks, and maybe that was who they're concerned about more than anything. But the small and big blinds are exactly in the position that you want to put a bit more pressure than that. The 2,800 is the kind of, that's going to get called by almost any big blinds.
Well, it's like he doesn't mind a call there. It's almost like he wants a bit of a call, possibly.
Well, for me, I'd look at it very differently. I'd look at it as a semi-weak player who doesn't appreciate that the stack sizes are such that if you want to see a flop, just call the big blinds. Your raise is just artificially inflating the pot for no value to yourself, because you're not going to get any folds from it, and your hand's not strong enough to raise properly. If you want to steal the blinds, raise it a proper amount, do it right. But they're too cautious because they've got absolute junk. If they're doing that with a real strong hands, okay, that's good balancing. Considering they've got a high betting frequency, they're going to have good hands as often as they've got bad hands. But again, you want to get value for that, so you balance it. If you're going to be betting big with your bluffs to get people to fold, do exactly the same with your strong hands, because people will start standing up to you, and thankfully that'll be when you've got great hands, and that's perfect. That's exactly what you want from your value hands when you've been bluffing big. So at the moment, I'm putting them on junk or such a wide range that their bet is almost irrelevant. It's all a matter of if we feel that the flop texture is going to come out such that we can shove. I wouldn't shove with 8-5. I just don't think you're going to get enough folds that the calls are going to be in good shape. I just don't think the maths. So at this stage,
and that's it. Right. And I don't think we're desperate enough. I think more than that, we're not desperate enough for that yet. Like, if we were down at 5M or 4M, then yeah, I'd be looking for a chance to just steal that, steal the pot, and 8-5 would be a good time to do that, as many would, against a player that's got a kind of high global frequency of betting. But we've still got like 8M, it's quite a lot of big blinds. I'm pretty happy to just call this personally.
I'd say so.
All right, so we do opt to call. Hero calls here, and the flop comes down. Pretty magic for us. 2 of hearts, 5 of clubs, 8 of hearts. So we've just made top 2 pair. There's the heart flush draw on the board, and some loosely connected straights as well. You've got the 5 connecting lightly with the 8, and 2 with the 5. So the action is on us as first to act. So we're out of position pre-flop. What are your thoughts in this position? So just to recap, we've got 7,500 in the pot now, and 25,000 in our stack.
So, I mean, I got a good feeling when I saw this kind of boards with this hand in this position, because it's the kind of thing we have been learning to do better. So my evaluation immediately was, this is a very good board for your range. You've got the range advantage, all the nuts advantage. You've got, you know, your twos, you've got your fives, you got your eights, you've got all of the two pairs. You've got.
When you say twos, five, eights, do you mean like sets?
Yeah, sorry, you've got all the sets because you've got you've got all the two pairs, and then, you know, you're sitting there with your 8-5 suited, so you've got that two pair, you've got the top two pair, you've got all of the straight draws that have come up, you've got 6-7 in your range, you've got 3-4 in your range.
Even like 4-6 for a double belly buster.
Yeah, everything is in your favour, but because the board's so dynamic, everything can change on the turn of the river. But at the moment, you're going to want to be betting, and you're going to want to bet big, because you want value and you want folds with your bluffs, is how I think this is. I might be wrong, but when you've got the nuts and the range advantage, you want to bet big, because the best hands, what's the best hand here? Pair of eights, they want value and they want people to call them, and also your big bluffs, because you're going to have a whole ton of bluffs in your range. So that's the other side, that your range is massive at this point, so you are going to have a lot of bluffs, but you need them to balance out the very best of your hands, so that every time you're betting big, are you doing that with a set of eights, or are you doing that with 7-3 offsuit that you just wildly called, or you're going to do that with your 9-10 offsuit that's not really doing anything? So yeah, I could be wrong. I don't know if the thing that's tickling my mind is, I don't know if your range is so wide that value betting at this point big is incorrect. But for me, it feels that the board is everything in your favour, very little in the pre-flop raisers' favour. Although the fact that they're betting high frequency does widen their range. What I was mentioning, if I'm going to pick the line that I feel that their bet was fairly weak, let's assume it has capped their range. So this board does hit them a bit more than normal, but I don't think they've got all of the two pairs. I don't think they've got all of the sets.
Yeah.
I don't think they've got.
I like your thinking. So I did think a bit differently at the time. So this guy was betting a really high frequency pre and post flop. So I was pretty certain that him being the pre-flop aggressor, that if I checked to him, he would be c-betting practically 100% of the time. So at this stage, it felt like I'm guaranteed to get some value just by checking. So I didn't think loads past there. Obviously, there was the hearts on the board. There's a chance that he's connected enough to have some sort of straight gut shot or something like that. But it just felt like he probably hasn't. He's probably just missed this board completely. His range is so wide, he could have literally anything. Jack 6. I don't know. Just anything. So it felt like my best option at this stage was to check over to the pre-flop aggressor, which I do.
Just to say in that then, because I really do like that. I like that a lot, because as much as you've got range advantage, the fact that this is a dynamic board and there's every chance that it's going to change who's got range advantage or who's got the nuts advantage on the next street. A check raise, as much as I said, oh yeah, you bet big, you bet out, what you said, like, they're going to see bet a huge frequency of the time if you check to them, and a check raise would be much better, because you get to realize your value bigger now, which actually also might yield some folds, because as much as 8-5 is great, two pair, it does also benefit from that kind of protection. There is flushes out there, there's wheels out there if they're playing like ace 3, ace 4. So protection isn't the worst thing. Was check raise your frequent your strategy, or was it check call?
Check call, and maybe in hindsight that is a little bit risky. I just felt like this guy would be getting to the river with pretty much anything if I let him. So I wanted to leave all of his bluffs in his range. Yes, there's an argument for protecting, but it felt like, if he c-bets, which I was pretty certain he would, I'll be calling it. We're then going to have, 12, 13,000 in the pot, depending on what he bets. I'm going to have two times that pot left over or under. It felt like all the chips were going to go in the middle, and that I should just play for that, and that by letting him be the aggressor, the chips will go in the middle, whether he's bluffing or he's got, made a flush or made a straight. So I kind of figured I want the chips to be going in the middle when all of those parts of his range are still active and able to be in the hand.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point that you've raised there, that because of your SPR anyway,
yeah,
and because of your position, all the chips are going to go in the middle. You're kind of committed. You've got way too strong a hand for this ever to be a fold. So I think you're right. Does it really matter if you're not denying him equity? There is no denying him equity. Like, the worst you can have at this point is him folding out his worst hands. I think as much as I was playing a different strategy, let's check raise, let's get some extra value. If your read is that he's probably going to be c-betting every street, that 100% is the best value. That gets your chips in the middle, and it allows him to be doing that
with nothing.
Yeah, and you're going to have the best hand so often that, if that's your read, go with it. And I think that's brilliant.
Okay. So we do check, and then the villain here bets just under 2,000 chips into the 7,500 pot. So just over a quarter pot bet. So as I said, my line here was to check call. I wanted to disguise the strength of my hand. I wanted to keep all of his bluffs in. And I know, you kind of agree with that line, or you at least see the point in it. Do you think there's a argument for raising here, though?
The only reason I would check raise, now you've given a bit more on the player, like, now I've fully understood the benefits of keeping him involved, keeping their bluffs in, would be if you felt they might shut up shop, or they might be enticed to play some draws that they've got at the moment, because at this point in time they could only ever have draws if they haven't already hit. So if your chips are going in anyway, you kind of do want them to continue to bet. You want to keep, as you said, you want to keep all their bluffs in at this point. The fact that they've only bet a quarter pot, I don't think is strong. I don't see there's much that they're doing that with. So on this kind of board, trying to read from their hands, what kind of hands are they holding whereby a quarter size pot is where they're trying to get value?
Well, this is it. And honestly, this guy was just his line every hand, and it worked really well for him. He'd made a lot of chips, just bluffing with probably the smallest amount he could to getting the cheapest bluffs through. And he just done it time and time again. So this bet doesn't really define his range at all. I'm still like completely lost on what he's got, and honestly don't remember what he ended up having. But I remember thinking, and still think now, this guy could have anything. It could be complete air. He might have a 2, he might have a 5, and he could have the 8. He could have a bigger pair. Like, it really was like, this guy's got anything. He really was just. You can't say for sure, but he'd gone for a lot of hands, just bet, and just getting tons of folds, just taking it all down constantly. So very difficult to define his range here.
I mean, for me, at this moment in time, I'm condensing his range. I'm capping it. Sorry, not capping it. I'm condensing his range, not polarizing it. my thought process at this point in time is that his best hands will be overpairs and a set of eights. I don't think if we take his pre-flop opening range as even close to what it should be, there's not much else that he's connecting with. And if you've got that kind of value, you kind of want to. It's a good board for that kind of hands. You kind of want to get paid. You don't want to be doing these small bets that aren't going to build much of a pot. Like for someone in his everything we've spoke about this player, all their exploits. If you've got a pair of eights, you really want to get every bit of value because you've been playing so many bluffs. You've been so frequent. The last thing you want to do is bet this little piddly amount that gets you to the river, having not even put all your chip stack in. That doesn't seem to be a good strategy. So why are you not betting a bit bigger with your bluffs, but also betting a bit bigger with your best hands? Again, we're applying logic to a player that, for all likelihood, doesn't yield that kind of logic. But that's what that bet says to me, that they're not interested in attaining value. The hands that they would be trying to get value for are nines, tens, jacks, blah blah blah, and a set of eights, possibly a set of fives. But there's nothing else that they're going to be trying to get value from. So what is the quarter bet size doing? Is that just trying to get rid of your trash so that you're calling with a stronger range that's going to give them value that way? I don't know. But then they're just doing a small continuation bet that they're hoping wins enough at the time because their hand's not overly strong, which is kind of how we're reading it. So keep them in.
I think so. And I think actually, and you know what, I can't back this up with any rationale, but I just know from studying it recently that if you've got a high global frequency of opens and bets, then because you're betting such a bigger range, and it might be polarized, he might be sort of checking the top pair of a weak kicker or middle pair a bit more. But if the top and bottom, like the bluffs and the stronger hands, you're betting a much wider range. That means you've got more bluffs in your range. But when you've got more bluffs in your range, you should have smaller value bluff. You should be bluffing smaller amounts. So smaller as in relative to the size of the pot, which this one is. It's under a third. And if you've got a narrower polarized range, so only your very strongest and your very much complete air bluffs, that means you'll be bluffing less. And so then your bluff amount, like the size of the bet comparative to the pot, should be bigger. But I don't know exactly why, but it kind of stands to reason a little bit. And because he's got such a high global frequency of betting, that kind of actually goes well with smaller bluff size.
Yeah, but that also does condense, unless they're playing exceptionally well, that does also condense what their likely playing is. The reason that I feel that you're saying they're betting smaller is because they've got so many bluffs, which means they've got so many bluffs in this position. You're beating almost all of their hands that they're playing with. I feel that they would be playing slightly different with the very best of it. I feel that their aces and their kings and their sets possibly are betting bigger. Whether that's strategically GTO correct is not where I'm at. It's more, would this player bet bigger with better hands? And I think they would.
Okay. You know what, as well, actually, and it could be complete air, but you mentioned like ace 3, ace 4 for the gut shot. That would be quite a good bluffing candidate, and that would sit well with the ace rag that we thought he might have pre-flop, because then he's still got a chance to improve. So it's like they call it like a bluff with some good equity, or like better equity. So you can do a complete air, or your bluffs can be good equity bluffs. So they need a card to complete, but when they do, you know, you've got a really strong hand. So
Yeah.
it could be something like that, but it's still difficult to tell. It still feels like he could have bloody anything, but that's probably not the right way to think about it.
Well, that's it. I think he could have anything, and that is a reason to continue with your line. I think that's a good line. If the only thing I say is if he's got the ace of hearts as part of that,
particularly good luck in hand.
Yeah, it would eliminate any of the flushes that you might be keeping in your bluffing range. Not that I don't think that's going to be important here, but it's just something that I'm trying to pick up from my learning, that if he's got that blocker, you can't continue to rep that. If it ever transpires that we do need to have that as part of our bluffing range. But I don't think that's the case. From the look of this player, it's let them do the work for us.
All right then. So we've thought a bit about villain's range here. Just as a recap, the flop is 2 of hearts, 5 of clubs, 8 of hearts, and we've got the 8 of spades and 5 of spades in the hole for top 2 pair. Villain raised pre-flop, we defended on the big blind, and villain's now bet just over quarter pot, and we are faced with a decision whether we fold, call, or raise. So, all right, all things considered, Tain, what's your action here? What are you thinking?
I would call, given the exploit that you said they would continue this for another street or two. But shoving in this position, if you think it's going to get calls from ace 8, ace 5, or even just, you know, king queen of hearts or something like that, do it. It's a really great spot to get the rest of your chip stack in and double up.
Like I say, this guy had been just absolutely running this table ragged. No one had. I don't remember seeing a showdown. So whether he would call, you know, an all in or a big bet with king queen, that's I don't know. That would be a bit more of a stab in the dark. I know that he bets and bluffs a lot, or you can figure he does because of how much he bets and how often. But whether he would call with 2 overcards, I don't know. Maybe that goes with this player, but we can't be certain of that.
I mean, yeah, I've definitely come up against players that are like that, where let's say it's actually not well within their style to be betting this often and this frequent, but because they're getting away with it, they kind of think, well, I'm just going to keep carrying on until I get calls. Yeah. And then as soon as I have to show my cards, I'm like, oh, quick fold, and then let's not do that again. Like, exactly, because they haven't shown their cards. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, we do opt to call. So
good moves. I like it.
Yeah, we like it. We're flat call, and I think it really kind of disguises our hand here. It looks like we might have a piece of the board, we might have a bit of a straight, and we're waiting for a card or the flush draw or whatnot. So the turn comes, absolute magic card for us. It's the 8 of clubs, giving us 8s full of 5s. So we are now, I feel, pretty well protected. I mean, you know, before I explain what I think, what are you thinking about this 8 of clubs? For how does this connect with our perceived range?
I am absolutely racking my brains for anything that's not a check. I mean, the hand's wrapped up anyway.
It's all about how do we get this bugger's chips in the pot.
Yeah. Is that a scare card for them?
It feels like if we had an 8, right? And I know obviously we have got an 8, but if we'd had an 8 on its own for top pair, would we have not raised that? We might have donk bet, or would we have not check raised it? Possibly we called if we had something like 8-9, 8-10, 8 jack, 8 queen, maybe even 8 king. So I suppose an 8 could be in a lot of our range, actually.
I think the fact that the board is two-tone, the fact that there's now a pair out there, everything is leaning towards check 100%. To keep you want to keep all their bluffs in there anyway. There are hands that will call your raise in this position, 100%. Someone who's playing really loose, who's picked up either of them two flush draws, might feel lucky, especially against someone they've got so covered that they could stack you off and still be comfy. But they would also bet every single one of them draws if they're the type of player who's been c-betting more than one street. Like 100%, this board doesn't trouble them in any possible way. The fact that you're checking is saying, I called last street, but I'm checking again because I'm a bit worried. I mean, if they do a massive bet, that would be the time that I'd pause to say a call might not be the best option then. Because
if villain does a massive bet, then maybe it would look too suspicious just calling.
Yeah, essentially, if they're doing a massive bet because they've got a good hand, then shove because you'll get called. If they do a massive bet because they think I'm worried about that, and the big bet is the only thing that's gonna get them to fold, a call will just make them shut up shop, and that's the last value you'll see. Whereas a shove might be, they might see it as, I've also got nothing, but this is my last bluff. It's only a small part of that, but a call will mean that you have no bluffs left in your range, but a re-raise all in to a big bet would mean I've also got nothing, but I've got no other option but to shove all in at this point. It keeps the bluffs in your range at that point. But whatever, like I cannot muster anything that says any other action other than check at this point.
Okay, well look, that's exactly what I was thinking at this stage. It's like, let's keep all this guy's bluffs in. So we check, but the villain also checks behind. Now, what do you think the villain might be thinking about our range now? Like when we check on the turn there are two hearts on the board and there are two clubs on the board. If we did have an 8, right? Because you've got to imagine at this point, us having a full house is possible, but it's a little bit far-fetched. And really, if you're worried about anything, you're worried about us having, the 8 or the 5 would have played this way. Maybe the 2 would have played this way. Maybe even something like pocket 6s, although we might have 3-bet that, we might have jammed pre-flop, but no, possibly pocket 6s as well. If we did have something like the 8, wouldn't we want to protect against both of those flush draws now that are on the hearts flush draw and the clubs flush draw? I feel like checking that turn is quite deceptive. It makes it look like we've still got some quite condensed range. We've got some middling card. We've got 5. We might have a pair of 6s. Surely anyone holding an 8 would be wanting to protect against the flush draws now.
Yeah, that 10 was a brick for all but the most obscure hands.
The river's a 10 of diamonds, by the way, so the flushies don't get there.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
But then neither do any of the straights.
None of the straights. It's a brick. The only thing that it services is a few of the hands that have got a 10 in, at which point they're either winning at this stage anyway or losing. That 10's not made the difference because you've got the 8 regardless. I don't think that 10's done much. No. I can't think of any action at this point that isn't check. And if they check behind, they check behind. And if they bet at you, it's an automatic shove. I mean, obviously it's an automatic shove because you've got 8-5, but I can't see enough hands in his range that would call a raise, a shove, or anything. I'm trying to work out. The only thing I'm toying with is if a tiny bet, 2,000 into, so the pot at the moment is 11,500 essentially. Would a 2,000 bet be a kind of buying, please fold? But yeah. I think that's too optimistic. Again, I just think it's too optimistic because if we assume that he's got nothing in his range, he's missed this board, that 10 didn't do anything. He checked the last street because he's obviously concerned about flushes. I don't know why he checked the last street, really.
I think he checked the last sheet because he hasn't really got anything. He's tried to steal it on the flop. It didn't work. The turns come, it's like, I've not got anything, or I've got some sort of draw, but let's just see a free card. He's in position, so we've already acted in front of him. This way he gets to see the final card, he gets to see the river for free, which kind of says to me maybe he has got a bit of a draw, actually. Because if he had complete air and we checked again on the turn, surely he would barrel and try to take it down.
Yeah, I think the thing you're most scared about here is the villain having showdown value. And that is the ace brags that we originally put him on. And that is, as in, he'll check the hands are going to check behind.
Yeah.
And I think that is the ace rags that you put them on.
Yeah.
But then I do also think that there's a lot of king hands, even Jack 10, Jack Queen, that the villain might be playing, especially if it was part of the plus draw, that don't really have showdown value, that they would raise. I think there's enough, but they're also not going to call to any raise.
No. I think we definitely need to check this. Like, we've got much more chance of getting extra chips out of him by letting him have another final attempt at stealing this pot. But I don't do that. I decide to bet the river. So into an 11,500 pot, I bet 8,500. Now let me just talk you through my thinking, because the thing is, talking this back through, I completely agree with what you're saying. We should have checked this and let this guy have one more stab at it, unless he's got showdown value, in which case he's going to be he's going to be checking behind. So at this stage, I decided to bet, and the reason being is that I figured I would get a call from very weak showdown value hands that the villain might be holding. Because if I was on something like a flush draw or a straight draw, which, considering my range and the way I'd been checking and playing passively, kind of did suggest, and the 10 is a brick, like you say, the 10 of diamonds, that none of the straights got there, both of the flushes didn't get there. All of a sudden, this looks like I might be bluffing. This might be a desperate attempt. I've just missed my straight draw, for instance. This is a desperate attempt, a really big bet on the, well, I say really big, three-quarter pot bet on the river. It kind of looks a bit like a bluff. And that was my thinking at the time, is if this guy's got any showdown value, any bluff catchers at all, then they are the hands that I'm targeting here, and I may well be able to get even like a pair of twos to call, even worse, like maybe an ace high, a king high. Those missed straight draws, the ace 3, the ace 4 might even call. If he had two hearts, he might call, with an ace, the ace of hearts. So I've done this here basically because I'm thinking my perceived, he might perceive this as a bluff. I think I've got a good few bluffs in my range on this board, and he might just see this as a bluff. It's particularly big after a passive line. It looked like I'm trying to see the river, and the river comes a brick, nothing completes. Bomb, there's a massive bet. Let's see if I can win it for bluff. So I was kind of representing a bluff and hoping he calls it very light.
Yeah, a big thing that came to mind when you were going through that was your chip stack really does represent that. So you can't really afford to lose the chips in the middle. And if you have completely missed everything, you've got a wing and a prayer. Say you were drawing to something and you didn't hit. Can you afford to be left with, what I can't work with? So you had 23,000. What are the blinds? Can't even remember what the blinds are now.
700 and 1,400.
So you are playing, like 8-7 big blinds at that point. Can you afford to? Is it better to take a stab right now and hope you can win a pot when the opponent's been a bit weak and you think they've tried a C-bet, they've missed, bought the river's come a dud? Is this your only opportunity? And the bet size is such that if they do call it or go over the top, you're not completely dead to the water. I like it, and I don't mind this as a strategy because a check has a lot of, it is fraught with danger, and it is that the worst thing that could happen is you check and they check behind. That is 100% the worst thing that could happen in this situation. It's without any proper reads that the villain's gonna bet everything they've missed at the end. But then this bet doesn't stop them doing that. If they've got bluffs in their range, as much as you've got less than the pot,
bluff. He can still bluff as well. The truth of the matter is, I don't think either route is incorrect. I kind of like both of them. I think we could have checked here, and that'd be a good line. Let him bluff at it one last time. But I also like this line of thinking whereby we're kind of representing a bluff, or at least we've got a lot of bluffs in our range, making him more likely to call with his bluff catcher. So I like both. I think both are perfectly acceptable.
And I mean, it's only a tiny thing, and I'm just repeating this as a kind of is something I've learned that I'm trying to instill. Most of your draws would have been to the straight. I mean, they would have been to the flush as well, but they would have been to the straight, which is important because they're blocking what he would have been drawing if he was drawing to the same thing. And there's not much else out there that he could be drawing to. I mean, again, if he's got the flush, he's missed it anyway, so that's irrelevant. But the things that you're drawing to block what he could have been drawing. So, like, that he's never hit anything anyway. It's not a bad place to bluff.
Because we're not blocking the 6s, 7s, and 4s and 3s, so are we?
No, as in if that was the range that you were bluffing, if you were drawing with. Does that make sense? Ignoring your hands, if you were calling his bet, say you called his flop bet with 6-3 or 4-3 or something, the fact that missed also blocks the fact that he was ever playing that in the first place. It should make it a slightly better bluffing place. Because it means he's more likely to be playing with overcards.
You're talking about blockers, right?
Yeah, so you're blocking the chance that he's playing absolute crash. So if your range, this is pure range, because obviously it's not the hand that you've got the best hand. If your range was that you were playing 3-4 or 3-6 or 6-7 or something, and you've missed, he weren't drawing to that because you blocked it. Well, it's not that he weren't. He's much less likely to be drawing to that because you blocked it, which means he's much more likely to be playing overcards, which means.
But aren't blockers, Tain? Aren't blockers like your exact holding? Don't you say that your exact cards are what are actually blocking the likelihood that he's got? You wouldn't refer to it as your range blocks that part of his range, would you? Because
no, it's more looking at it from his perspective. That makes sense.
So he would know that our range blocks.
So if he was drawing to absolute, sorry, that's I've explained that in the real wrong way.
No, you didn't. I just couldn't get my head around it.
Because I was talking from our perspective, not from his. But sorry. So if he's looking at his range, which I don't think he is, but let's say he was looking at his range, he's looking at, if he is looking down at 3-4, he knows the chances of us also drawing to 3-4 are very small. So where does that leave the rest of our hands? What are we calling with that?
Oh, so if
he's beating,
if he had a straight draw that missed, he would know that we probably don't have a straight draw.
Yes. Sorry, really convoluted way of getting it. So we're more likely to have a pair of 2s, pair of 5s, pair of 8s, so that his ace king, which is also a part, let's just assume that's part of his range, wouldn't be getting value from showdown. But it's kind of looking at ranges a bit convoluted there. Is what he's playing one or the other, but all the same, it's that kind of how does that shape his shoving range at this point? Because essentially, as much your bet's good, there's as much value in checking, I believe, as there is in betting.
Yeah.
I don't think any size bet. I think there's a lot of value in everything. If you overbet, it looks like a bluff, and he'll call you with bluff catchers. If you bet tiny, it looks weak, and he'll shove over the top. Yeah, like, to be fair, I think you're in such a good position from such a passive position.
Obviously, I really wanted a call, and I think, I mean, maybe a bigger one might have got through as well. But I guess this is sizable. This would be great if this gets through.
I mean, unless he turns over a pair of tens, and this literally is drop the mic moment.
Please God, don't turn over a pair of tens. And he could well have, but it doesn't seem that likely. I don't know if and actually a pair of tens could play this way. They're happy pre-flop, they're happy to bet the flop. Turn comes, all of a sudden, his tens are no good. He checks it, and then bosh, 10 on the river completes his full house. I mean, that is one exact holding. Well, there's a couple of combos of pairs of tens that you can have, but
it's been passive. So the whole point is that we've not removed anything like that. We've not removed enough for that to be a concern. You'll pay it off. If he's got tens, hell, have all our chips. You know what I mean? That's just how it is.
Exactly. And the point is, when someone's got such a high frequency of betting, their range is that much bigger that the chances of them having an exact holding like a pair of tens is just tiny. It just becomes tiny. Although it's against a much tighter opponent, he might have a narrower range, and you might start thinking he has got something more like an over pair on the flop. A really tight opponent at this stage in the game, if he had like I don't know, Queen 8 suited, right? He's got top pair with a decent kicker. A lot of people might check that down and just try to see the river, but not this guy. This guy would just be going hell for leather with all of it. But that to me just means that he's that much less likely to have a pair of tens in the hole.
Yeah.
But all gone.
I was just going to say, what bluffs of yours have got to this stage that are now making this bet that he's beating with either a call or a shove? Because that's the ideal scenario. But we need him to call. We want him to shove.
I think we've got loads. This is the thing. I think we've got loads and loads and loads of bluffs in the range, right? We've got, all right, let's list some of them. So we've got all the 6-7s, including 6-7 of clubs and 6-7 of hearts, which also pick up flush draws on the turn. We've got the 6-4, we've got 7-4, again, of hearts and clubs as well, just to pick up those extra flushes. Potentially 3-4 suited. Would we defend with that? Probably, especially against this opponent on the cutoff. I think we've got 7-9, and then again 7-9 suited especially. We've just got absolutely tons and tons that of bluffs at this point. All of them, even stuff that wasn't a straight on the flop. If we had 2 hearts on the flop, if we had like 5x of hearts, we might feel like we need to bluff this river because we feel like we're beaten. Although, would we? Probably not. No, we'd probably want to show that down. So that maybe not that one. But all of the hands that didn't make a pair, that
6
connected, all of them would be bluffing now, I'd say. And there's tons of that. It's the exact type of range we've got, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot that his bluffs could beat. 6s, 4s, 3s. A bit. If he shoves over the top, 6s, 3s, and 4s. I think there are hero calls in there, but at the same point, they're also trash if you think he's strong. So it wouldn't be the worst place for him to bluff if he thinks that's where you're at. What was my last line of thinking? I'm just trying to think through things like the sets, what you would have raised with. I'm just trying to finalize what his action's going to be. There's the pot. Anyway, sorry. Move on.
Have a look.
Yeah, I think we've gone through everything.
I think so. So he calls our bet. So just to recap, the rivers come, the flushies didn't get there, the straights didn't get there. We've got a full house, 8s full of 5s. We called his bet on the flop. We both checked the turn, and then the river came a bit of a blank, really, and then we bet 3/4 pot. And the villain has called. Now, before we flip over his cards, I know it's a little bit less relevant, but now that he's just flat called, do you want to take a pop at what hand he's got? I'll tell you what, you got two. You can guess 2 hands.
So I'm going to go with the ace rag, and I'm going to be cheeky and say the ace rag is both 2 and 5. Ace rag.
Okay. Yeah. So ace 2 and ace 5, yeah?
But no, they're the same hand. So it's just ace rag. Ace rag's one of the hands.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Just looking, the bet size is too big for pure air. So he's got her own piece. Pair of 9s. Just as a complete wild card. And I don't think he's got a pair of 9s. I think a pair of 9s would shove at this point. After your check. No, you know what? Get rid of it. Not 9s. It's important, John. You've challenged me now, so I'm going to have to run back through.
Take your time. I'm just going to finish the last of my 2 rebels I've got here.
You're worried about the 8s. So you check to. No. Yeah, go with the 9s. I forgot that they've got position on you, and you've then bet back out pair of 9s. Pair of 9s and ace rag, cheekily 2 or a 5.
Villain flips over. Ace 3 of diamonds.
Right.
So he didn't have the flush draw, but he had a gut shot straight draw on the flop.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, he had a bit of equity. It was kind of a bit of an equity bluff. I don't know how much. When it's just a gut shot, I'd like to look into actually how much equity that's got, especially when there's 2 hearts on the board. But
yeah. But sorry, remind me of the action. You checked to him on the river. The flop.
Yeah, on the flop we check to him. He bets about 1/4 pot and we call.
Yeah, I reckon your range is such that a bet in that position with the gut shot will yield enough folds, even from the like of 6-2, maybe, that you're thinking my SPR is such that I need to pick if I'm shoving in this position or not. And I just don't think 6-2 is the place to do it. So even though I've got a 2, it's just not enough. Like the board can double pair. There's just so much that could happen that 2 might not even be a pair at the end of it, that you could fold that. There is much better hands that can also fold, as well as if you don't fold, they've got options. I think they're not as good options as they should have been, but the position in the tournament's significant enough. I can't imagine any other way you'd get more value out of them.
Yeah. Okay.
Because if you'd have checked to them, their bet could have been smaller. The bluff bet on the ends. I don't necessarily think it will be, unless you've got a read that says that they would always bluff all in. to give you a real difficult decision. Well, it weren't a difficult decision, but assuming it would be a difficult decision with a weaker hand, unless they do that, I think it would be about the size or smaller than what you did bet. So you're going to get as much value as you did there.
Yeah.
It's weaker than I thought.
What, his bluff catcher? Yeah, definitely. It's like he was going for it, and then, I mean, yeah, who knows if he was thinking about it on that level, but it's, you know, you'd only call ace high unless you felt like I was, you know, missed a draw of some sort, as he did. But, you know, if he's looking at ranges, and he might have perceived us to have something like 6-7, you know, 6-4, 7-9, stuff that's got a chance, but that needs to complete with something.
I think that does confirm your reasoning on the river, because your reasoning was that you were representing the exact kind of hand that ace 3 would be. Exactly. The bluff, that was your bluffs. And he's like, okay, he's read it exactly that and thought, well, you know what, let's give it a try. You've done the sizing right. I reckon if it is a shove, he's folding the ace 3. If it's smaller, let's say you did quarter pot, he's probably just calling quarter pot as well. So your reasoning is good.
Yeah, it felt good. I was happy with how it went. I feel like I'd have scared him off with a check raise. I think if I'd have bet the turn, he would have been more reluctant to call a river bet, and I don't think I could have got as much value on the turn as I did on the river. But who knows? You know, he might have been fancying his chances. But yeah, it felt good anyway. You know, there's always a number of routes that are pretty good. You know, it's not always about there's one exact answer and an exact way to play it. Sometimes a number of options could work, and I think this was a good one.
Yeah, no, exactly that. And I mean, what you're talking about, the value on the turn, the river could have changed all of that, if that makes sense. Like, it could have been another 8, at which point that you didn't get this bet on the end, and the turn bet was smaller. It could be that the river was an ace, at which point you get the whole of his stack. You can only play what's in front of you, and the villain will take. It depends on the quality of the villain, but sometimes it is just the direction of the wind that decides why they're doing a certain bet in a certain way. They could just need the toilet, so they bet a bit more aggressively.
They might have just been pissed off about something and decided to bet big. All right, Tain. Well, look, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I do love it. I love a lot of the insight that we've gone through, range v range, trying to pick up on what the villain might be looking at our range with, how they might be feeling about certain scenarios, what their cards are that they're doing certain actions with, which not very recent past, I wouldn't have done anywhere near as much. And it feels quite comfortable now, which is brilliant. So, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, man, keep it up. I will too. All right, guys. Well, look, thanks for listening in. We hope you got out of that as much as we did. And have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Yep, love you all. Cheers.
Take care.